I never had any captain, any lieutenant come and tell me, Mario, this is where we want you to go with this investigation. Well, that was unheard of. The investigations, and not every investigation, of course, but a lot of those complex and serious investigations sometimes are driven by the political narrative.
Yeah, I remember when I was in internal affairs from 2011 to 2015, I used to average just north of 3,000.
Right.
And someone just told me lately it's like maybe 4, if that. But 80 over north of 8,000?
We were
Massive.
not only we need to settle these cases from the beginning, we need to settle these cases even in litigation.
Correct.
So that's where the 6 pillars comes in.
Welcome, bienvenidos, Feliz Navidad. We're getting close to Merry Christmas for everyone. Welcome to the Internal Affairs, a police podcast. It's your host, Marlon. And gosh, it really kills me to say that everybody's a special guest. Today I have a special guest. They're all special. And Mario, I can't thank you enough for coming in here and sharing your story. Thanks for coming, man.
Of course.
So the way we start the show, and I know we have a lot to talk about considering your experience, and man, you know, I'm really interested to know, I suppose, how we pave the road into internal affairs. Is I get to ask my guests these 2 core questions. So the first one is, let's get right to it. On a scale to 1 to 10, right, 10 being the highest, please rate the importance of internal affairs in a police department and why?
I would rate it a 10.
Okay.
Definitely a 10. And not the fact that that's the only important part of police work, but I think that's what keep us clean, keep us where we should be. And we need that part of the process. And I think one of the reasons, too, is that any law enforcement organization, you're going to have some few bad apples. We do, you know. Whether it's the 1%, some organizations that can rate up to 5%. Yeah. But we are. So especially in an organization like LAPD, which is actually probably at the lowest right now, which is coming up to 8,500. I think the last count was 8,800.
Absolutely.
Never seen that before. And I think you mentioned you had prior the podcast regarding why we got to 8,800 and so forth. But we definitely need that part of it, whether it's the 1%, the 5%. We definitely need to investigate, and we definitely need to get rid of those apples. And we know that no cop hates more than a bad cop.
That's right. No good cop hates more than a bad cop. That is so true, accurate, and 100. I couldn't agree with you more. Here's the second question. IA's job, internal affairs investigator job. So I'm an IO. What's their job? What do you think?
I have to agree with Brian, which is your last speaker, which is
my guess,
which you guess, which is an investigator is a fact finder, but it's a fact finder of the truth of the matter, which is different than just being a fact finder. And we know that the truth of the matter in any organization is going to have consequences, but it is. Investigators is a fact finder toward the truth of the matter.
Do you feel sometimes that truth of the matter, as you're investigating, tends to be forgotten in your experience?
Well, if you ask me 10 years ago, depending on where we are now, I think the truth of the matter now is becoming whose truth of the matter is. And now it's becoming us to partly truth of the matter. That means that I'm going to direct you to what the truth of the matter is. So we don't have what we used to have. Back then, investigator had the autonomy to go in there and find that truth of the matter. I know through my years of investigation, I never had any captain, any lieutenant come and tell me, Mario, this is where we want you to go with this investigation. Well, that was unheard of, right?
Unheard of.
Now it's like, no, this is where you're going to go. And we don't want you to go here. We don't want you to go there. So, yes.
Yeah, don't turn that stone.
Definitely.
That's my motto.
No.
No stone goes unturned. It's interesting you say that because I word it as it's self-serving. It's a little personal, right? So, and you and I both know this. We're both a retired LAPD, and a big machine like ours, man, there's so many levels of review that. And look, you know what? Let's be honest. Let's be transparent. Sometimes it gets personal. Sometimes it's self-serving. You know what? Like you said, don't go this way and investigate that. Or I've heard, you know what? I think we're pretty much done. We're good. We're good. You know what? You don't have to do any more follow-ups or any more interviews.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that because that's exactly how it is now.
Yeah.
That is exact. And I'm not just getting this because I think that's what's going on, but because I'm very relevant as to what's going on in the department. And not only in the department, because I deal with other outside agencies as well.
Yeah.
This is throughout the state, and I would say throughout the country.
Yes.
Because the investigations, and not every investigation, of course, but a lot of those complex and serious investigations sometimes are driven by the political narrative.
100%, man. You know what?
And we know that, right?
We know that, and we're going to get into your experience because I know that you consult a lot on these disciplinary matters. You're 100% spot on. I got to share a story with you. I got retained as an expert witness for, believe it or not, and of course my expertise, like yours, it's very narrow. So if you're going to hire me, whatever firm for everything related to discipline, I actually had one where there was a lot of peace officers' Bill of Rights violations. And when I got the case, I'm just looking, just to give you a highlight, the actual investigating officer was a public utilities manager who was a lawyer. So they said, the city just said, you know what, you're a lawyer and you're just a man. And it, as funny as that may sound, get this. He investigated from beginning to end, right? And when they were getting to get service, right, Skelly, the process, they just realized that he had peace officer powers and that he's post-certified. He was a sworn investigator. And without getting into any more details, there was a lot of violations. But I bring that up to say that you're 100% spot on. It doesn't just happen in LAPD. This is happening nationwide where people don't really know the business and the nature of your duties and responsibilities. More than anything is the fact to have this kind of knowledge, which is one of the reasons why I decided to do this podcast. And I appreciate you coming in and sharing this with me. Let's go, and thank you for that. So now we're going to take a trip down memory lane. So we're going to get to the good stuff now because, man, let's see. 33 and a half years?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. And you were lieutenant for 7 years, is that correct?
Yes.
And then you worked in internal affairs for 10.
Yes.
So that's where I'm going to pull these strings and see where I can get all this experience from. And then this is what impresses me the most because 22 years in patrol. Kind of fill in the gas for me and, anything else you can highlight from your career because that's a stellar career to be do 33 and a half. And here we are having these conversations and I appreciate you for that.
Well, I made sergeant when
How many years?
12 years. 12 years, which is now these days is, especially with LAPD, you make sergeant when you have 5 years, 6 years.
Yeah.
So 12 years is, I had a lot of fun. Mid Sergeant out of 77. I was a +1. I was actually my area was the flashpoint of the riots. I was there during the riots. Actually, I was there the date that we had the starting point of the riots, which is Florence and Normandy, the liquor store. This is where all started.
Wow.
So 3 days later, of course, I went home, but that was one of my highlights as a patrol officer, which is a +1. I love the streets because I think that's where I make the most
impact
in my community. And my area was probably the first area that we initiated, which they call the police advisory boards.
Okay.
So I was very involved with the community. But at one time, I decided when my probationers were responding to a supervisor's call, and this happens to be my probationer, then I said, I better start promoting.
Yeah.
Which 12 years. Then I promoted. I went to Pacific. I went into a gang ward, and from there I went to Harbor, narcotics, gangs, vice. I did everything. And at one point I decided, I better get my administrative skills down. Tight. Not because I wanted to promote, but because I said, I want to be a better writer. I want to be a better speaker. So everybody said, well, you got to go to internal affairs to do that. So I was lucky. I went and did a loan in 97. And my first case there happened to be a very significant case that I did as a loan. We had to do loans.
Right.
And because of that case, I was lucky to be selected. And it happens, Chief Carter, who was a captain at that time, he became a deputy chief. He selected me. I went back, and that's why I started my tour in internal affairs, which is, I want to say, one of a kind.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you and I have had we've talked, before we decided to do the episode, and you really brought into light something that I'm definitely going to use with your permission, is the 6 pillars of discipline. I found that theory to be very significant, if you will. I also find it to be very important for everybody who's listening and watching, because not many people really know the disciplinary system. And when you mention, hey, Marlon, you know what? I want to talk about the 6 pillars of discipline. And then you followed up with a subtitle of Fair and Consistent, which is exactly how every single investigating officer doing this type of function should be, right? We just talked about get into the truth of the matter, right? And we know how sometimes it gets swayed. But let's see. So I know one of the first pillars is the initiation of the complaint. The second pillar would be to investigate, right? To the investigation in it itself. The third pillar is the adjudication, which is the result, right? Here I am, got to make a decision, right? I'm the adjudicator. I'm the captain, a command staff officer. And then you have the service, right? So now I'm making this decision. I'm about to serve the officer, right? And I got to look at certain issues that you'll discuss. 5 is the hearing. That's the Skelly, right? And I mean, even you wouldn't be surprised, but a lot of people don't even know what a Skelly is. They don't even know that he was a doctor who showed up to, and I'm deviating a little bit, but yeah, he showed up to work late and was drunk all the time. And they fired him, right? He was a state employee, and they said, he's like, well, wait a minute, what are you firing me for? You got to give me, what did you guys use? What evidence did you guys have, or what did you use to fire me? And I believe the case ended up in the California Supreme Court. They said, yeah, you're absolutely right. They need to let you know, they need to give you every single piece of evidence that the department used to terminate you. So they ended up saying, okay, cool. You know what? We'll bring you back. We'll give you everything. And then 2 months later, he ends up getting fired. And people don't, and again, you can read all about the case, but it's something similar. If you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but it's something along those lines. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then last but not least is the appeal. Not many people know about the fact that you can appeal your disciplinary investigation when you do get skellied. And I'm going to leave the floor to you because not just me, but we want to know what's the 6 pillars all about, and give us some examples and really tell us a story how you even came up with these pillars, if you will.
Well, the story, again, when I came to internal affairs, just like anybody else, I worked investigations. I worked 2 different sections. In fact, when I came to internal affairs, the section that I was working on, it was headquarters.
Okay.
That is the section where the Rampart corruption erupted, pretty much. That's the section that responded when there was cocaine missing, and they went and respond. They call them call-outs, right? That we go there and do a call-out. And I did that for a year, and then I went to a different section. And I did that for another year, and they said, well, Mario, you're ready to review these complaints. Now, back then, the integrity of the system, I think we were lucky to have some great training officers. Which they did tell you, hey, here's the truth of the matter. We got to get to the truth of the matter, no matter what. And there was nobody that would come to you and said, you can't go and talk to that witness. You can't do this. You can't do that. So I was very lucky to have some great training officers, which they felt, Mario, you're ready to go into the auditing section of internal affairs, which happens to be, they call it review and evaluation section.
That's right. Checks and balances.
Checks and balances, right? So you got to know that LAPD has over 11 levels of reviews. 11.
I keep saying 6 cents in the cookie jar, but
No, 11. 11. And now, that's a big machine, right?
Correct.
That's a huge process. And that's why this process is so scary. So when I went to the audit section, I was kind of lost. And I go, okay, what am I supposed to do here?
Right.
And my first complaint, I remembered there was a lady that was in charge of the unit, and she opened up the locker, and he goes, here you go, welcome. And he shows me there was about 4 or 5 boxes. Happens to be the Rodney King case.
Wow.
So it's like all the cases, because Rodney King has many cases.
Right. Landmark, definitely a landmark case.
So he said, you're going to need some time with this complaint. So I think I was home for over a month, reviewing the complaints, putting up
Page
the
after
puzzle,
page.
page after page, trying to recover paperwork that wasn't there. So I learned a lot from that, and from that I gained a lot of experience, a lot of insight. It's like, threw me on the lake. You said, boy, now you think you thought you knew something, now you don't. So that's where I said, I need to know the process. I need to know how the department works, not only from beginning to end, but so I learned how the department works. I learned how use of force works. I learned how the disciplinary system works. And then I started doing the auditing, and I became good at it to the point where I became the officer in charge of that unit at one point. And also during that time, the Rampart Scandal hit, right? Back in 1999 to 2000, that's where all the started investigations, everything started, and flooded the department. We were getting up to about 8,000 to 8,500 complaints a year, which is
massive.
Now these days is what, about?
I think 4,000 or 5,000.
At the most.
Yeah.
Maybe 4,000 sometimes.
Yeah, I remember when I was in internal affairs from 2011 to 2015, I used to average just north of 3,000.
Right.
And someone just told me lately it's like maybe 4, if that. But 80 over north of 8,000?
We were the
Massive.
right, and I learned again every unit that I worked. I learned so much, and I had good people. I had good trainers. Trainers that have a lot of integrity, and no matter what, they did the right thing.
Yes.
And that's what I was taught. The truth of the matter, Mario, no matter what.
And if I may interject, and I just learned this buzzword through politics, it's what they call influence peddling. That's pretty fancy, don't you think?
Yeah.
That's a fancy word. That's right. There is, through this whole levels of review, unfortunately, there is some influence peddling.
Oh.
Not intermeddling, but influence peddling. In other words, hey, let me show my influence to the outcome of this particular matter.
I think the eye opener for me was when I was in this section, running this section, be part of the team. I attended a meeting, and that was when, of course, there was committees because of the Rampart corruption. There were committees because we wanted to investigate all these committees that the chief formed to find out, again, the truth of the matter. Mm-hmm. And I remember going to the academy, and I was standing there, and because I knew all the investigations, I knew who was who and what.
Right. Who's who in the zoo.
Right. And I'm looking at, and the chief is passing out certificates of appreciation. And I look at the people that were getting those certificates of appreciation, and I go, wow. He was the ones that were working bureau when the Rampart hit. So I started saying, well, maybe we shouldn't be doing that. Maybe we should start focusing in just kind of rebuilding the trust with the community and so forth. So I was lucky doing that, and that's where I started picking up these pillars that we're going to talk about.
Correct.
And so one of I was lucky when I was working this section, which I did for close to 5 years. I was lucky to present some cases to the chiefs. Mm-hmm. And I did that because generally it's going to be a lieutenant maybe or a captain.
Right.
I was a sergeant too at that time.
Right.
But I was the officer in charge, and also I was project manager for certain projects. So I was lucky to go up to those chiefs and present some of these cases.
Plus, you were very involved in those
Exactly.
cases. So you pretty much knew it all.
And sometimes they come in on the last day of statute. Now you have 200 pages. And we look at this complaint and go, how can you even read this complaint? The captains will look at me and says, I don't have time to read it, so you read it and you go up with me to brief the chief.
That's right.
Which I did, and I said, I don't think this should be sustained. But again, we go back to politics, and they said, no, all Rampart cases are going to be sustained. So over 100 people were actually sustained with very little to review, and there it comes. Then there's the chief. The chief was changed, of course, change of leadership, and they're looking for a good chief, right? So, and the story goes that one of the chiefs happened to be Martin Pomeroy, who happens to come back from retirement, mm-hmm. And that's actually where the cleaning up started. Mm-hmm. That's where Pomeroy is the one that said the footprints that says no. Rafael Perez is not credible.
Right.
It's not credible.
Right.
So
there's some heavy lifting to be done.
There's a heavy lifting to do that. But now, how do you reverse back all of these cases that are being in the sad thing about it, Marlon, is that a lot of people And there were some people that actually died. They
Yeah.
actually committed suicide based on pain pills because of these disciplinary cases.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and he's the one that says no. And I remember that case because I presented that case, and he says, Mario, what do you think about this case? He says, it's not, this is totally unfounded. I can prove it. And he says, okay, make it unfounded. So we made it unfounded. When I came back to the office, those investigators, they wanted to lynch me.
Yeah. They wanted to
Because
hang
said,
you.
oh my God, we are gonna put in our investigation, we're gonna put an IO note that Mario Munoz said that Rafael Perez is not credible. I said, well, go ahead. I'm not saying it, the chief is saying it. And he's the chief.
That's right.
So, well, he's just Santa Claus. And that's how his nickname. He's just Santa Claus. And I says, no, he's what? Fair and consistent. Mm-hmm. So from that, we started doing what is called biopsies in every case.
Mm-hmm.
We overturned a lot of these cases. We went back. We overturned a lot of cases. Yeah. I don't know how many. And then I look back, and that's when Bratton came in and kind of finished the job.
Right.
And that's where Bratton said, how are we going to fix this? We cannot just fix it by overturning and going back and re-adjudicating these cases, but we need a way to fix it. And that's when he came out with this notion, which LAPD, it's like, oh my God, you're out of control because you're coming from New York, you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
And he came up with this notion, it's called the disciplinary settlement. I said, Bratton said, why don't we just settle the cases? And he goes, well, we can't do that. It's just LAPD. What are you talking? It's not New York. It says, why not? We would just, it's like a plea bargain, right?
That's right.
We settle the cases, we do this.
Two sergeants are going to...
Right. And I says, okay. I said, well, we never tried it before. I guess we're going to try it. Who are we going to pick to do this project?
Yeah.
So they picked me.
So you were in the settlement unit.
I formed the settlement unit.
You formed the settlement unit. Good for
So-
you. I got a couple of stories about the settlement unit, but good.
So the settlement unit did over 500 cases.
Wow.
And you're going back to Peace Officer Bill of Rights violations, you're talking about
Yeah.
everything else. We did over 500 cases that they figured we will never settle these cases, and we did. And you know why we did it? Number one, because it was the right thing to do. But
Yes.
number two is because cops are going to tell you what they did wrong.
Yes.
They're going to admit to you what they did wrong. What they don't want to face is this screwed up charges that you make up to get them fired, or to do this, or to what is used to call "I got you" allegations, right? And that's where Bratton comes in and said, "No more I got you allegations are it."
Yeah.
Well, guess what? We're back again to the "I got you" allegations under
Yeah.
this administration. We're back to "I got you," and worst. So out of that, I said, well, we got to develop a system to this forensic audits. And we have to look at these cases from beginning to end. Mm-hmm. And we have to look at this, and I call it the pillars. Because we got to look at this from beginning to end, because a lot of them were already in litigation, with lawsuits, we're already there.
Right.
So we not only we need to settle these cases from the beginning, we need to settle these cases even in litigation.
Correct.
So that's where the 6 pillars comes in, which is now
Interesting.
it's to me is a survival tool that you gotta have for every law enforcement out there. You think just because you work West Covina and because you work Ontario PD, you don't have to know all that stuff. You do.
Yes.
We have to know it because we're a larger organization.
Yeah, big machine. We have a lot of
Big
cases.
machine.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
absolutely.
But in your organization, you also have to know those 6 pillars.
Yep. Yep.
So that's where it's a long story, but that's where the 6 pillars came in, and ever since That's what I use.
Well, you know, as I'm listening to these very challenging times of you being in, I suppose, like the pre-adjudicator, right? I mean, they're asking for your help and by the way, the Rampart Scandal is huge. Let's not mistake the fact that it was one individual who just went completely rogue, right? But the way I see it is, just because it's one doesn't mean it affects every. Would be one way of looking at it, right? Or I should say, one thing to consider.
Right.
I think what I'm getting out of these 500 or the ones that you settled is that, look, there's violation of policy and procedure. I totally get that. Maybe you neglected, you failed to do this, or you violated this type of policy, or maybe this procedure. Best practices, if you will. But when you start adding these particular charges, not getting to the truth of the matter, because look, hey, this is a traffic stop, this is a pedestrian stop. They legally did both. However, there was a mistake, of a policy or maybe a procedure. But then now you want to make that to be, well, wait a minute, you work with that rogue cop that just, and again, it's a Lama historical case. Then if he goes, we all go.
Yeah, and you're right. It's when we start piling up allegations that had nothing to do with it. Okay, especially now, which is if you want to send somebody to death row, which is I call give them a false statement allegation, right?
Yes.
So I had a case where I did an audit. I did a Public Records Act for LAPD for a 5-year period, and there was 42 death row
Termination cases.
Termination cases. Out of those 42, 50% were not guilty. 50%.
So that leaves you to like maybe 20 or so.
Right, which is 21 cases were not guilty. So the question is, why would you want to charge somebody with false statement knowing that you don't have false statement? And what people don't understand, and goes to the first pillar of initiation of complaint, is there's a public complaint and there's a internal complaint.
Correct.
With public complaint, you have no discretion. You got to take the complaint.
Correct.
Because somebody says, hey, he beat me up and all that, you got to take the complaint, no matter what. And that's what keeps internal affairs as number 10, because we got to investigate it. We
Absolutely.
have to.
100%.
But when you have internal allegations, for us, I was taught, and when I train my auditors, you don't make internal affairs allegations unless you can prove it. It's not the burden. It's no longer the burden of proof. It's not 51%. You got to go higher than 51%. You got to either have them on tape. You got to do. I mean, you got to be really good, because you are terminating this person.
Yes.
Which
absolutely.
in turn may end up damaging his whole life. So 21 cases, people went to a board rice and they were terminated. Now, I can guarantee you, if somebody would have gone to the 6th pillar, which is the appeal process, and I don't know how out of those 21, how many were actually, they filed a writ to Superior Court and they did all that, because I would guarantee you, out of those 21, probably about half of those would have been thrown out.
Or overturned.
All overturned. Yeah. I don't know if they did that or not, so I don't have those stats, but I can guarantee you, I did one all the way to Superior Court, and it was thrown out because of the false statement allegation as well. So they're very easy to overturn.
Right.
However, who's going to be willing to do that?
Yeah, and if I may interject, I think a lot has to do with the fact that we don't really. Well, let me start off by saying we're very fortunate in LAPD to have an actual false statement definition and a misleading statement. We actually have one. You'd be surprised. I actually teach for Savage Training Group, and when I go and teach to all these small, it just came from Clovis PD up north in Fresno. in one of my blocks of instructions, say, hey, does anybody here, you guys have a false statement or a misleading statement policy? And they're looking at me like, no. And some people will say, well, you know what? Yeah, we have Lexipol. I go, well, I'm kind of familiar with Lexipol because I spent a year in the Cal State University system, as a lieutenant. And I'm here to tell you, I looked at it. You don't. But our beloved LAPD does. And you know what? That is a good thing to have. Mm-hmm. Because when you start talking about these particular kind of allegations, we're talking careers, we're ending careers. We're affecting family, finances, the whole nine, not to mention the emotions and the process. And you know this, when I was an advocate, when people are waiting, the accused employees for border rights, it can take 8 months, a year, sometimes even after a year. So again, we need to know what the factual basis of that actual false statement is. And it better not be, well, Mario said that he was on First in LA, but Marlon, the IO, said, no, he was on Second and Grand. And if that's all you have as evidence, stand by, because you need more.
And to expand on that, in the initiation of the complaint, a lot of officers don't know their peace officer bill of rights is like anytime there's a complaint, anytime somebody calls in and says, hey, I want to make a complaint against Mario or Marlon. And then the sergeant says, hey, Mario, come here. So-and-so wants to make a complaint about you. What about this?
Yeah.
What happened? And then the guy goes, oh, no, Sarge, me, all that. And then the next thing you see, you're on a complaint form. And then there's a sergeant say, well, I spoke with Mario, and Mario says this.
Yes.
Well, it's a big violation of Peace Officer Bill of Rights. We know that, right?
Yeah.
However, when the false statement allegation, and the sergeant comes in and says, hey, tell me about what happened. And then he writes a complaint, and there's your statement, right? And
got him.
Oh, I got him. And now you have a false statement allegation, and then you violated a Peace Officer Bill of Rights.
Yes.
You know how many cases we settled because of that?
Oh.
And that was part of the settlement process. And I said, you can't go ask the guy knowing that he's a subject of a complaint to give you a statement.
Yeah.
Because you never told him there was an investigation. The only thing you told him this. So the problem is all the way to appeals that unless you bring it up from the very beginning, mm-hmm. and unless you attach to those pillars, it's not going to matter because they will go and send you to a board of rights based on that false statement. Yes. It doesn't matter whether it was obtained illegally or not. And that's where the review process is. Settlements was the clearinghouse. That was the only chance they had to be able to say, hey, Mario, look at my complaint. The sergeant came to me, and then we get rid of that false complaint, and we fix it. Now we can't fix it because now...
It's too late.
Well, no. Now these days is you don't have a settlement unit like that anymore because now they have control of the process.
Yes.
No longer you have an open door policy that people can come into you and complain about it. No longer, because now I own control of the process. So now they got to appeal it to Superior Court if they're lucky.
Yeah, so. My experience with the settlement unit, and this you're probably gonna chuckle and laugh about this. We had a case. It wasn't my case that ended up at a board. I believe they were trying to opt for a board of rights, like go to this hearing, because they felt like the penalty or the allegations weren't, the defense attorneys doing their job. So they go to the settlement unit and they say, hey, listen, my client will settle for 22 days. That's fine. We're good. I've spoken to my client, and we're good to go. So settlement unit, for whatever reason, says, nope. We talked to the bosses, send it to a board, right? Have them go to the hearing. You know what ends up happening at the hearing? He ends up only taking 5 days, which is backwards. It's like, wait a minute, hold on a second. And my client was willing and able to take, I suppose, a heavy suspension. 22 days is pretty heavy. It's like a month, right? it's like a threshold, if you will, but they ended up with 3. I bring that up to say that the system, it does have some flaws, and our big machine is not well oiled. From the times that you started, right, which I thank you, because I can tell you, because of what you did with your colleagues and the people that work for you, and I just left a year ago, and I was a complaint coordinator. I actually had all complaints come in for MTA, right, the transit. We took the contract for the trains and the buses, and I had every single complaint citywide, and I used to teach, and really guide and delegate these sergeants to say, hey, when you do an intake, this is how you should do it, right? But I've never really seen it at that pillar where, so your hard work and your knowledge has paid off, because at the intake stage, at the first pillar, it wasn't. That's not what it really affected such a serious allegation of a false statement or even a misleading statement. It normally happens in the investigative stage, and that's where this strategy of an IO, of the investigating officer, because you and I both know, normally the framing of the allegation is on such and such day and on or about such and such date, while on duty, officer so and so made a false statement during an official investigation. Any thoughts?
No, I think going back to, and that's going to relate to what you were saying. Just going back to what you said is that, and here I'm trying to kind of do the same thing you're doing, right? Which is phenomenal, because the only way that we're gonna overcome what officers are going right now
is stigma.
Through right, and not only that, but through education.
Yes,
the officers need to know what they're facing, because I just feel I've been very active since I retired. I have a nonprofit that deals with defending.
Tell us about that.
Defending police officers.
Tell us about that.
It's called Blue Ribbons, blueribbonscenter.com. And we retired. There's a lot of retired law enforcement officers, lieutenants, detectives, sergeants, that actually help officers that actually come to us for advice. And they say, look, I had this complex investigation. Nobody wants to see it. I've talked to my attorney. My attorney said, wait until you're bored. And then we look at these complaints and we said, well, let's review your complaints. And that's what we do. And we just, we give advice. And we look at those 6 pillars. And we says, well, your pillar number 2, which is investigation, was totally, it's really bad.
Bad.
It's really bad. I says, first of all, they didn't interview so-and-so. They didn't do this. They didn't do that. And now what they're doing, Harlan, is I don't know if they were doing it when you were there, but I know they weren't doing it when I was there, is investigators come in to the first level reviews. Here, my supervisor or my lieutenant, and sometimes they said, hey, here's my investigation. Here's the USB. Go at it.
Yeah.
Go at it. Well.
Yeah, hold on a second here.
Hold on a second. This is your investigation. I know when I wrote my investigations, you got to redline it, and you got to tell me whether I got typos, whether I got this, I got that, and I'll
do your job.
I'll fix it
and review it.
But other than that, you're not going to tell me what to add, where to add, who to drop, any of that stuff, which is happening right now.
Oh yeah,
as
of
we
course.
Speak.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So that is why the officers now up there, they need to know what the rights are. They need to know. They need to know all these pillars. They need to know the adjudication part of it. Who's adjudicating your complaint?
Yeah,
is somebody that maybe you had an issue with in the past, and and I think we talked about it off tape to a case that I had where the adjudicator was the captain, and the captain's wife was the former girlfriend of the accused. And then the captain frames an allegation of false statement through the adjudication process, which is unknown. You don't do that ever. And he made a complaint, and they ignored the complaint, and he wanted to be demoted. So that's why it's so crucial that we learn what the process are.
Yeah, you know what, Mario? It's just, I would say I'm surprised. And you would think someone...
Are you surprised?
Yeah.
Come on,
Oh my God, I am in so shock. I'm shocked to know that there's, and you and I can go on forever and talk about a lot of these cases. And I appreciate you being very, candid and sharing your experience. And I couldn't agree with you even more, knowing that a lot of education is lacking, and we're doing such good work. And I appreciate your nonprofit. And of course, if there's anywhere I can help out, I'll be more than glad to do that. So I think we pretty much covered the 6 pillars are pretty good. And I know that for future episodes, we're going to have more stories, to count on. But let's get to the other segment of this episode and talk about, just real quick, about worst and best. Tell me about a time. Tell me something, the worst thing that you've seen or you experienced when you were on the job.
I think the words for me was I was working at Harvard Division, and I was a gang sergeant, and there was a radio call, shots fired, and we responded with my unit. Then we had to get down. It was hard to get to the place where the shooting was occurring. There was no path, so we really had to kind of go through some rocks and so forth and get. Well, we finally got there, and there was 3 kids. They had been shot. They had been shot in the head. We later learned that it was the father of those kids. So I think that stayed with me. It's still with me for a long time, and I had to make a decision. Because the only way you can get him out of there is through a helicopter. The good thing is we were in Pedro, so we got the help of it was either the fire department or there was an army base down the street. Right. So we got him out, but to me that was the worst of the worst I ever seen. And I think that that trauma stays with you. Yes. They stay with you. They stay with you forever. Yes. And I think that's why it's so important that we take care of our cops. And we don't do any more than what they need to go through, especially when it comes to discipline.
Yeah, no, absolutely. How about best? Give me something funny, something good, something that you're proud of. What's the best service for call or job or something that stands out in your 33-and-a-half-year career, man? I tip my hat. I applaud you for that.
I mean, I did a lot of community projects. I did a lot of them. My last assignment was in Mission, and I did the Safer Cities, so I was able to do a lot of good work with the community, reduction of crime without arresting a lot of people, without arresting half of the community, of course, which I believe that you can't arrest your way out of crime, but you have to work in partnership with the community. And we did that, and we had a great success. I think the best, but I always go back to, I was a reflection of the people that work for me. Okay.
Very well said.
I was a reflection of that. When you, as a leader, whether you're a sergeant, lieutenant, you are who you are because the people you have with you. So for me, it's important that, and this is why I classify internal affairs as number 10, to go back and start thinking about the people we manage and how we can help them best. I think the best time, what I can remember, because I'm correlating helping cops is when I met with Chief Pomeroy one time, and he's the one that made that turn.
Yeah.
And he's the one that says, no, we're going to do it right. And to me, that was the best, because I knew that at that time there was a lot of lives were going to be saved.
Yeah.
And that was the best time. I mean, of course, as a beat cop, you always want to correlate that to community things.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I always look at whatever we do out on the field, whatever we do, because we owe it to the rank and file that are doing it for you, and you look good because of them. Yeah. And as a chief of police, you can never forget that.
Yeah. No, totally. Totally. Well, hey, you know what? Look, Mario, we can definitely have more conversations about this. I really, truly appreciate your sincerity, your sentiment to officers. You are in the same cloth that I am in, wanting to help officers out. And those are the lessons learned from your pillars. I think the lessons learned from me are, hey, know your rights, right? Definitely. And don't take that investigation for what it is.
And I think another lesson learned is that, and this is for everybody out there, for whether you're LAPD, whether you're West Covina, whether you're Ontario, there are people that care for you. There are people out there with the expertise. Know your limitations, and don't trust everything they tell you. So there are experts out there. There are people that are willing to help. So reach out, and like you said, know your rights, but knowing your rights is going to the people that are going to go ahead and guide you in the right direction.
Those are the parting words, my friend. Hey, look, thank you so much for being here. I'm sure that we all appreciate it. We conclude this episode. Again, don't forget to push the like button, subscribe, definitely share it, and download it. And happy holidays again. Merry Christmas. And like always, don't forget to go Code 6. Thank you.